Welcome back to Off Ball Takes. This is your host, Jarby Laws, and this is my co-host.
Christopher Wells.
The NBA regular season is officially over, so the playoffs have basically arrived. We're super excited about all that. But before we get started with today's episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on Instagram and Twitter at the OBT Podcast. Oh, yeah,
Right.
and Happy Easter. We forgot to say that. Happy Easter. I hope everyone enjoyed their Easter.
Yep. So also just kind of like another update. We're once again, as we go through the playoffs and the play-in, we're going to be doing live streams
Right.
after the games, just kind of reacting to what we're seeing. So for our first one, we're going to go live after the Lakers Timberwolves play-in game. So, just come in to the channel, as we're streaming, just to talk and discuss, if there's people in the comments, in the chat or whatever talking, we'll discuss with you. And, in addition to giving our own regular thoughts, we just kind of wanted to put that out there so that way everybody knows what's going on before the playoffs start.
Yeah, it should be a
But,
vibe. Just come
yeah,
through and chill, man. It's going to be fun.
exactly. Yeah, but just to kick it off today, kind of a pretty, I guess, funny in a way end to the regular season, I suppose.
Yeah.
You had a lot of the Eastern Conference games at 1 p.m. didn't really mean a whole lot because everybody in the East was pretty much locked into where they were going to be. But the Western Conference matchups got kind of interesting. They were all at 3:30, right? So because they were all at the same time, you didn't necessarily have the normal shenanigans where teams are trying to kind of jockey for position.
Right.
So everybody had to play, right? Because there were a lot of potential scenarios that could have happened, depending on who won what, who lost what game. But it pretty much went the way that I thought it was going to happen, right? We had Phoenix and the Clippers, right? Phoenix sat all of its starters and the Clippers played everybody. It was pretty close for a while where Phoenix was up for most of the game,
Mm-hmm.
and then the Clippers, eventually turned it on, flipped the switch, and were able to, get to the win. Warriors, right? Same thing. They played against the Trailblazers, but the actual difference was instead of it being a close game, they pretty much stomped them the whole way,
Yeah.
right? I mean, what was left of Portland, and then Lakers Jazz was kind of back and forth for a while, right? Again, it was another situation where you could tell they were pretty much coasting, and kind of like just going through the motions for most of the game.
Right.
But and then we had this really interesting game, which I think was actually the one that was actually the most entertaining between the Wolves and the Pelicans, right? So you had a scenario where, obviously it's a big game because whoever wins, is would have been the eighth seed, right, playing against the Lakers for the
Mm-hmm.
play-in. And so it was pretty back and forth, right? So initially, New Orleans had the upper hand, right? Brandon Ingram was going off. He had 21 in the first quarter, right? Outscoring Minnesota. They were playing really poorly. And then it got to a point where, towards the end of the first half, you have Rudy Gobert and Kyle Anderson getting into a really heated argument discussion, right? Where they were
Yeah.
going back and forth, cursing at each other. And then it ends up with Rudy Gobert punching Kyle Anderson.
Yep.
Yeah, just I've never seen anything necessarily like that before. I mean, we've seen, I guess, players on the same team, maybe have like altercations that aren't necessarily punches, right? Where
Right.
maybe guys are yelling at each other, or maybe guys are sort of grabbing each other, but never necessarily punching each other. Or I guess Gobert really punched Kyle Anderson. Right, because the Draymond Poole thing, that was in practice, right, during the
Yeah.
off. That wasn't necessarily in the middle of a game, right? It was practice where there weren't really any stakes.
Yep.
But regardless, it was really strange. After the altercation, Gobert was sent home by the team, which was, just sounds kind of bizarre, sending an adult home. But
Yeah.
again, understandable given the circumstances. And then it was kind of crazy because Minnesota actually ended up winning.
Yep.
And also, despite this, Jalen McDaniels, um, he also had a scenario, or
He
excuse
punched
me,
the wall,
Jaden
right?
McDaniels. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say I forgot. Jalen's the one for Philly.
Yeah.
Jaden's the one for Minnesota, and he punched the wall. I guess he was frustrated at how the game was going, right?
Yeah.
And then he broke his hand, so he was done.
Yeah. It's like a
Um,
fracture or something like that.
exactly. Yeah, his season's over. But then Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns, right? Mike Conley, they end up having like Torian Prince. They end up playing really well. Kyle Anderson plays really well as well, and they actually get a huge win to close out the season. So instead of being the 9 seed, they're the 8 seed. And
Yeah.
we're going to get into it when we talk about the plan, but just kind of unexpected scenario, because you kind of thought it was going to be a dogfight, but New Orleans for a while looked like the better team, and then when that happened, it seemed like Minnesota was energized, and I mean, yeah, that's a pretty impressive win, I think, by Minnesota. Given what happened, given the stakes, I just, I think hats off to them, even though they've been pretty uneasy as of late, right? They had the stretch where they were playing well and people were kind of buying into them. I know you had them as like a semi dark horse, right?
Yeah.
But then it kind of felt like, then they had a couple of bad losses, right? They had the Lakers loss where they couldn't score in the second half. And then the loss to Portland, the skeleton crew version of Portland, which was abysmal.
Yeah.
But
That
I
was
will
rough.
say, I'll give them credit for today's game. That was a really impressive win and a much needed win.
Yeah, I agree with you. With Minnesota, like I said, they're my dark horse candidate, but yeah, I think they look pretty good today. Like you said, considering what they had to face, due to the actions of some of their players. But I kind of wanted to circle back to the Warriors game. They played Portland, and they actually set a first quarter record of 55 points in a quarter. So that's pretty wild. It is understandable. Like, people are gonna trash talking and be like, "Oh, it doesn't really matter because you're playing against the G League Portland Trailblazers roster." But nonetheless, it is a record. And I think that's a good sign for the Warriors as well. But yeah, this play-in I think is going to be exciting, and I can't wait to really stream it and talk to everyone about it. But yeah, I'm really hyped for these playoffs, and it's really shaping up to be really exciting. And today was super hectic. I thought it was going to be kind of quiet. Everyone was kind of going to go into the seedings a little bit, under the radar. But wow, yeah, there's been a lot of news, like, and going back to the Gobert thing, I think Draymond like kind of fired back because I think Gobert originally tweeted when Draymond had an altercation, insecurity is
Yeah,
loud, something along those lines. I don't want to mess up the quote, but I think it is insecurity is loud. And then Draymond kind of replied to that today, basically saying the same thing on Twitter. So, like I said, it's been pretty hectic today, unexpected, like you said. So, if this is going to be the theme for the playoffs, I'm all in for this.
exactly. So as we get into it right now, we have at the very least the play-in scenarios, right? We have a few first-round matchups that are already determined, right? Because 3-6 and 4-5, right? Because those teams aren't involved in the play-in, those are already set. So obviously in the East, right, you have Philly, Brooklyn, and as the 3-6, Cavs, Knicks is 4-5, and then in the West you have uh Kings, Warriors as 3-6, right? The Warriors get that coveted 6 seed spot,
Yep,
right? Because I think most people feel like, of the top 3 seeds, the Kings are probably the most vulnerable
for
one.
sure.
Uh, yeah, and it feels like, am I allowed to talk about Vegas on here?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, I was
yeah,
gonna say,
yeah, yeah. You're good.
you can cut that out if
Yeah,
you want.
for sure.
Yeah, but just going back to the Warriors thing, right? It also seems like Vegas kind of agrees, right, that that's kind of the ideal matchup because their odds for the title, or at least coming out of the West, jumped up when that
Yeah,
happened, right? 'Cause, everybody wanted that 6 seed. But it was kind of weird with the Kings, right, where they sat their guys against the Warriors and then they played their starters today, albeit only the first half. But just kind of a bizarre situation. But and then obviously 4 or 5, we have Clippers Suns, right? But so there's pretty high key, interesting matchups there.
yeah, yeah.
And then we go into the play-in, right? So we got Heat Hawks as the 7-8 matchup. We right, so I guess
Hmm.
kind of a rematch of what was a first round matchup last year, but now because the Heat are worse this year, they're in the play-in against the Hawks. Um,
It's gonna be a
Lakers,
good game,
Timberwolves,
or
yeah,
yeah, good
exactly.
one. Yeah,
Yeah, Lakers, Timberwolves as 7-8, right? That's pretty interesting one. Obviously, I'm assuming, right, Jaden McDaniels isn't going to be playing, right?
right.
We know that. I don't know what's going to happen with Gobert. I wonder
Doubt
if
he's
he
in.
gets suspended. I know he apologized, publicly, for the altercation, but I don't know, because in a high stakes game like that, you almost kind of wonder if they're going to be like, because he's, one of our best players, we should play him, or if they're going to suspend him. I don't know.
Right.
Um, and then for 9-10 in the East, we have Bulls, Raptors. And then for the West, we have, I believe, my bad,
Yeah,
New
you're good.
Orleans and Oklahoma City.
Yeah,
So of these playing teams, I guess we can talk about it.
for sure.
So I guess we'll start with Heat Hawks. Kind of get that one out of the way. I feel like Miami's better than Atlanta. I mean,
Yeah.
it feels like Atlanta has like more collective talent, but also with Miami, like I believe in Jimmy Butler, I believe in Bam, Spoelstra. So I don't know. I would be pretty surprised if Miami lost that game, but again, they've kind of been really up and down, mostly down this season. So it wouldn't shock me if in like a one game scenario they just have like an awful night since they've been one of the worst offensive teams in the
Yeah.
league this season. I also don't really trust Atlanta, just because it feels like they've just really underachieved. But I don't know. What about you? Like I said, for me, I'm picking Miami for that one.
Yeah, I'm picking Miami too. I think, like you said, the consensus I think among most NBA fans is that the Heat are a better team than the Hawks. But I think the Hawks have more potential. I think that's also agreeable. I think, like you said, the talent on the roster for the Hawks is really good, but they just haven't been able to exercise that to the fullest of their ability. Unfortunately, they were a really hyped up team coming into this season, but they have not performed as well as we thought, and I think that trend is going to continue into the playoffs. Unfortunately, I would like to see the Hawks go far. I'm not a Hawks hater at all, but I also had the Heat as a very good team going into this playoffs, this season's playoffs. So I think with the Heat, like I said, they're just better. That's the only explanation I can really give. And like you said, Jimmy buckets when it comes playoff time, it's a different kind of guy. So expect him to have some big games, probably some clutch moments on both ends of the floor. And I think exactly. And another thing I wanted to add in was coaching. I think Eric Spoelstra is probably going to outcoach Quinn Snyder, but we'll see. I'm not sure. I at the end of the day, I think the Heat are going to win. But the Hawks do have a chance. I'm not going to count them out, but I think it's a small chance. But Heat are my favorites.
So the winner of that game will play the Boston Celtics.
Yep. And that's the matchup that we were kind of hyping up as well for the Heat. So I'm kind of praying for that. That'll be fun to watch.
And then the loser will play the winner of the 9-10 matchup right between the Bulls and the Raptors. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I'm not super excited about this matchup. Both teams, to me, have been pretty mediocre this season.
Yep.
I guess, with the Bulls, there's more potential with, in terms of how explosive they can be sometimes with Levine and DeRozan.
Mm-hmm.
They've been actually a pretty solid team since the deadline, right? Their defense has been really good. Obviously, you got two really good offensive players. So between them and the Raptors, then you also have the Raptors, who I just feel like have really underachieved this season, right? They were pretty good last year, right? They won almost 50 games, but it's been a really tough season for them, right? They haven't really played that well. Obviously they got Jakob Poeltl as their center, but still, they've still been relatively just mediocre, right? Nick Nurse seems like he's not getting along with guys, and it feels like he can be, out of there as soon as the season's over. So you almost kind of wonder if Toronto is just kind of praying that their season just ends, as opposed to going into a long playoff series. So I don't know. That one's kind of tough, but I feel like in a one-game scenario, I feel like I might have to go with Chicago on this one, only because Levine and DeRozan, I could just, they could have a huge game where they both go off for 30 plus, right? And they can still get stops on the other end.
Okay.
I just don't know about Toronto. I just don't know how locked in, and how into this they're going to be, just considering all the rumors we've heard about them this season. Stuff I haven't heard with Chicago, even though they got issues of their own, with Lonzo being out due to injury.
Yeah. For these teams, they both had their fair share of woes this season. It's really hit them like a truck, to be honest. And it seems like it comes in waves too. It's like one after another. But for me, I think I'm going to take the Raptors over the Bulls. I know that might be a little hot, but I believe in Siakam. He has a lot of playoff experience. He has a title as well, but the Bulls are, I think, one of the more underperforming teams. Is kind of similar to Atlanta, where you look at their roster and it has some talent on it, and you would think they would be better than they are. But like we said, they have experienced their fair share of woes. But I think, to be honest, this could come down to coaching as well. And I hope Nick Nurse's head is still into it, and he still has passion for this team and the guys that he's built this team around. But we'll see. But I'm going with the Raptors on this because, like I said, I think Siakam's going to explode. But at the same time, I feel like a Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan explosion is probably more likely. But depending on when it happens and how it happens, I think Siakam's could be more impactful. You know what I'm trying to say? But
sure.
Yeah, and you never know because guys do tend to bounce back, so we could be looking at Van Vliet exploding, whoever, and OG Anunoby's great, but I think he'll be a solid factor as well because he's one of the top defenders in the league. Great 3-point shooter too. So I don't know. With the Bulls, the only thing that really concerns me with them is their depth, but the Raptors aren't very deep as well. So we'll see what it comes down to. But I think this is a pretty much a stalemate. But I got to take the Raptors on this one.
I guess, for me, my concern, would probably just be like, I don't know, Toronto's offense, I don't know, has just been really weird this season.
Fair.
Again, I guess again, Chicago's hasn't necessarily been amazing either. It's just I'm just factoring in like, down the stretch, right? You got Levine, you have DeRozan, Toronto has Siakam, but he's a little bit different as a creator
For
compared
sure.
to DeRozan and Levine. And I don't know. I could be wrong. I just feel like the Bulls in general have played better basketball as of late, but
Yes.
this one could go either way.
Yeah.
Like it was like I'm not, it's not a hard line. I'm picking the Bulls to win. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. I get you.
Like it
I
could,
get you
yeah,
100%.
it could be like 51-49
Literally.
for me, like Bulls. Like that. That's kind of what it is for me. Like it could really go either way.
Yeah, it's tough because, like you said, they're liable to go off, but the Raptors, they have some players that are liable to go off too. So it's all going to come down to who steps in the big or steps up in the big moment.
Yeah. Then moving on to the West, obviously we got Lakers, Timberwolves, right? Um, as a Laker fan, the Wolves kind of at times, kind of make me nervous just because, of their size, the length.
Yeah.
I do like a lot of the guys on their team. I think the Mike Conley addition has been really, really good. But, now I also have to factor, okay, McDaniels is out, right? He's probably their best defender.
Yep.
I don't think probably he is. I think their best defensive
For
player.
sure.
Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen with Gobert, right? Again, I don't know if he plays or not, right? If he doesn't play, obviously, that makes their size, a lot less impactful, right? Because McDaniels and Gobert are two of their bigger players, right? McDaniels at 6'9", Gobert obviously at 7 feet, right? Then also you have to factor in, right? It's a home game for LA, right? Obviously, the fans are going to be really pumped, right? This is going to be the first time that like a full crowd is going to be able to see a Laker playoff environment game, right? Because the last time they were in a playoff environment game, right, that was during the earlier part of COVID, right? So
Yep.
there weren't as many fans. I think it was like less than 10,000 people.
Yeah, it wasn't a lot.
Yeah. Then also you got the LeBron AD factor, right? Obviously they're going to be probably the two best guys on the floor. So I feel like with this one, I feel like it's probably still going to be closer than I think some people might expect, but I feel like the Lakers are going to pull away just because I think with the LeBron and AD experience, combined with Minnesota probably going to be being a little shorthanded, I think I'm going to have to go with the Lakers on this one.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. It's so hard for me to pick because, like I said, at the beginning of the podcast, I picked the Timberwolves as my dark horse. Because I believe in them. I think they have a lot of potential. I'm a big fan of Ant Edwards. I think he's a rising star. He's really stepped up to the plate and, said the team is mine now. But like you said, there are a lot of disadvantages that the Lakers do have going up against the Timberwolves. But at the same time, it's LeBron freaking James. Like, we can't count him out. And, he's healthy or healthier than he was earlier. And same with AD, but I think the problem is the Timberwolves have way too many question marks right now, especially with the Gobert thing. I think that's the only thing that's making me hesitant to actually follow through on my take with, the Timberwolves, but I'm going to have to honestly pick the Lakers too. That's a tough one, but it's not by much, but I think the Lakers will probably win just because we don't know what's going on with Gobert. And with Gobert, I think he's become the villain of the NBA somewhat, and I think they'll come down hard on him, with the punishment. I think he'll be suspended for a little bit. I don't see him returning, by Tuesday. No shot, especially since after what happened today. So I think with the Lakers, I got to pick them, mainly because, it's LeBron James and AD, and, is D'Lo healthy as well? I can't remember.
So his foot issue is kind of weird. So
Okay.
George Sedano for ESPN said his foot thing has been because he has calluses in his feet.
Okay.
And they've been trying to treat it, but it apparently hasn't necessarily worked. So that's why his foot thing is going on. He's
Okay.
been playing, right? But I'm assuming he's this callus thing. He'll probably just have to play through.
Right.
So, for now, he played today, and I'm assuming he'll be available for the play-in game, right? But obviously, they're going to be playing through. They've been playing through injuries for a while now.
Yeah. But
But
it seems like with this matchup, it's kind of weird because a lot of
yeah,
positions kind of cancel each other out in these scenarios. But because you got D'Lo and then Mike Conley, it's just weird. But I think with the Lakers, like I just don't know who's going to be able to guard Anthony Edwards and stop him. But with Minnesota, I don't know who's going to be able to stop LeBron or AD. If Gobert is not playing. So, like I said, the matchups are going to be really interesting. So I'm keen to see it. And it's low key another narrative storyline that we were talking about a while ago with the trade deadline and the earlier in the season. This is D'Lo's kind of, I guess you want to call it revenge game. He's playing
yeah.
against the Timberwolves.
And
So
Malik Beasley at Vanderbilt.
exactly. And,
Both
we didn't touch on it when we were talking about some of the other playoff games that were going to be happening, but, Russ versus KD. So that'll be another narrative as well. But, yeah, I'm picking Lakers on this one for sure.
And I think with the Lakers, you also have to factor in they've been really good since the deadline. I believe
Exactly.
they're like 18-9, right? Which is pretty much, the trade deadline is what really saved their season, right? They started off 2-10.
Huge turnaround.
I think they're the first team in almost 20 years to finish 2-10 and still finish with a winning record. So I
Exactly.
think like even though they've been kind of coasting the last few games, I feel like just momentum wise they've been playing way better. It just feels like I feel like they're going to win that matchup.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one though.
Yeah. Wee. Ho
Literally.
Yeah, I don't know if you should keep that in.
I'll keep it.
Oh boy.
I'll keep
Okay.
it.
Wee. Ho All right. That's so cringe. Okay. All right. So the winner, yeah, so going back to that, the winner of that matchup will play the Memphis Grizzlies in the first round. So obviously that's going to be a really interesting first round,
Yeah.
to keep an eye on, right? Because, obviously, the new and improved Lakers, right? Obviously they could potentially challenge Memphis in the first round. And then, going back to, even Minnesota, right? They played last year in the playoffs against Memphis, and it was a pretty close series. And actually, for a good chunk of that series, Minnesota led in a good chunk of those games, right? But they just couldn't close games down the stretch, right? And Memphis was able to pull away.
Yeah.
So that I think that after the play-in, whoever wins that, I think it'll be a pretty fun first round matchup against Memphis. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, whoever loses this, right, will play the winner of 9-10, and
Yeah.
obviously that matchup is New Orleans and Oklahoma City.
Yep.
Kind of funny. New Orleans was a team where I had pegged them as my most disappointing team in the Western Conference. But since that point, they had been playing much better. They had gotten a little bit of help, right, playing some shorthanded teams, but they're also shorthanded, right? They got
Yep.
guys out. Brandon Ingram's been great. Obviously, he's been playing like a superstar pretty much since that point where I kind of wrote them off.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously they have a lot of other dangerous players, right? CJ McCollum, Valanciunas, Herb Jones, right? Even though he's been struggling shooting wise, right? I still think he's an effective player. Trey Murphy's been great.
Yeah, he's been really good.
So I think so I think it's still a pretty dangerous team. Obviously with Oklahoma City, you have to factor in Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, right? He's been great this season. Right, and they have a lot of other dangerous players, right? Jalen Williams,
Yep.
Josh Giddey, right? But also like it's a very young team with
Extremely.
really, yeah, exactly. They haven't had really any real experience, right? Because with New Orleans, they went to the playoffs last year.
Yep.
And I don't know. I mean, also, but the only thing that's unfortunate, right? Zion, it appears like he's going to be doubtful to play in the play-in.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Exactly. So that makes it kind of tougher. I feel like New Orleans should win this matchup. I feel like New Orleans is the better team, even without Zion. I think they should be capable of beating Oklahoma City, right? Oklahoma City's pretty small at the front line, right? They don't really run a real center. Even though they have a number of like long athletic players, right? Shea and Giddey, that's a huge backcourt, right?
Yeah.
Shea
It's really tall.
Josh Giddey's 6'8". But I don't know. At the same time, I just feel like with New Orleans, I just feel like there's more guys I would probably trust in a big game more. and again, Oklahoma City's so young, and maybe they could win. And I also just wonder, like, with Oklahoma City, like their situation also is different because I feel like if they miss, if they lose and then they're out of the plan, I don't feel like they're gonna be disappointed, right? Because
No,
they're gonna be in the lottery. They still, outperformed everybody's expectations of them, right? I think most people thought they were gonna be one of the worst teams in the league.
I did.
So, yeah, so win or lose, they're gonna feel fine. Whereas New Orleans, right, if they lose in the plan, I think they're gonna be really disappointed. Um, one other factor kind of is that pick swap, first round pick swap situation between the Lakers and the Pelicans, where they had the option of swapping first round picks, right? So if New Orleans finished with a better record, they'd swap. But
Hmm.
obviously, if the Lakers win in the play in, right, and they're the seventh seed and New Orleans is like, either eight or out of the play in, then, their pick will be better and there won't be any need
Exactly.
to do pick swap. So that's kind of so I feel like with New Orleans, if they lost, they'd be pretty disappointed. So I would pick New Orleans because I feel like there's a lot more at stake for them, and I just think they've been in bigger situations than Oklahoma City. I don't know if Oklahoma City's ready for a game of this type of magnitude. They could win it, right? I'm not gonna count them out, especially in a scenario where it's just one game to win. But I
Yep.
think with this one, right, you got Brandon Ingram, you have Trey Murphy, you have McCollum, you have Valanciunas, you have enough to beat Oklahoma City. So I'm gonna pick New Orleans to win this one.
Okay. I'm kind of torn on this one. I think it's going to be really close, and I think the Thunder are I think they're hungry because I think they're seeing what they can do without Chet. I know Chet hasn't played, a single NBA minute, but he's a pretty, high value prospect, and I think, without him, they can see what they can do, and this is showing their potential. But the Pelicans are a good team. We've said it multiple times on the podcast that we love the Pelicans. We just wish they were healthy, but the Pelicans can take this, but also the Thunder as well, because I think something that people aren't talking about too often is the playing environment is very similar to March Madness. And you've got a lot of young guys on that team. Some of them who are a little bit closer to that college level, but they could treat this like a March Madness environment and just ball out and just have a great game all around, just the entire team, and just completely shock the world. But at the same time, the Pelicans are a very scary team, even though they're not 100% at all. But like you said, I think experience is probably going to be the main deciding factor with this one, because I think CJ McCollum is probably going to put the team on his back and just say, "Yeah, we're getting out of this tournament." But yeah, I think I don't know, man. It is a tough pick, but I got to pick the Pelicans on this one. So
Yeah.
it's tough, but the Thunder do have a shot. I'm not counting them out yet. And I think this is going to be one of the more exciting ones. I think this is probably going to be on the same level as the Lakers Timberwolves one. Like I said, I'm not too hyped up about the Bulls Raptors one, just because I honestly don't care about those teams, to be honest. And they've honestly, been very disappointing as well. Hawks Heat, I think, is a little bit more exciting than the Bulls and Raptors one, mainly because I really want to see the Heat take on the Celtics in the next round. So, but this is going to be a good matchup, I think. But time will only tell, and I'm picking the Pelicans as well.
Yeah. And then I guess to kind of just, sort of put a bow on this. So
Hmm.
obviously, we have the losers, right, of the 9-10 matchup. They're going to be out, right? And
Yep.
then the winners of 9-10, right, we'd have to decide who's going to win that matchup, right, between, whoever lost between 7 and 8. So, like, say, for example, right, I had the Bulls beating the Raptors, right?
Hmm.
So then I picked the Heat to beat the Hawks. So, right, between the Hawks and the Bulls, who do I think would win for that final 8 spot?
Right.
Uh, so that one is, I think that's really a toss up. Um,
Yeah.
I think that's really a tough one to decide. I feel like Atlanta should beat Chicago in that one because,
Yeah.
again, I feel like they have more talent. I feel like they're a more complete team. Like, but it wouldn't shock me if they just laid an egg and just lost to
Yeah.
Chicago. But I'm gonna pick Atlanta over Chicago just because I just feel like that one is, I
Okay.
feel like that's the more likely scenario. Now you had the Raptors, right? So
Yeah.
the Bulls don't matter for you in this scenario.
Yep.
So I guess between the Raptors and the Hawks, who would you have for your eighth seed?
Mm, The Hawks have
the
been
right to
very
be the Bucks?
disappointing. The Hawks have been
Okay.
very disappointing this year,
Hmm.
but I still have to pick them. I think the Hawks are better than the Raptors because
Yeah.
if the Hawks are better than the Bulls, then they're automatically better than the Raptors. So I would definitely pick the Hawks. Although it would not surprise me if they
What I'm
completely
saying.
just
Yeah.
poop the bed, and just it's over.
Exactly.
So
And
I
again,
I understand that.
yeah. Right. And again, in a one game setting, right, anything can happen, right? I
Anything.
mean, obviously, like Atlanta could have a game where they play really well and blow out, whomever they're playing, but they could also have a game where they just play really poorly, right? Even
Exactly.
say like that could happen to Miami, right? Miami could just have a game where they just can't hit the side of a barn, and then, before we know it, right, the Heat turn into, the chill or whatever. Like that
Yeah,
could that's
something.
yeah, exactly. So that makes these playing games a little bit tougher, but again, right, because normally over the course of a 7 game series, usually the better team wins out, right? But when
For
it's
sure.
single game, right,
Anything can
as we
happen.
saw yeah, exactly, as we saw with college basketball this season. Um, then moving out west, right? So obviously, so I had New Orleans beating Minnesota, so they would play, or excuse me, I had New Orleans beating Oklahoma City,
Mm-hmm.
so they would play Minnesota,
Yeah.
right? So between New Orleans and Minnesota, for me, I mean, we just saw in a regular season matchup, right? Minnesota won despite them being shorthanded. Um, but I don't know. At the same time, like without McDaniels, because I feel like I know that he played right and didn't really do much, but I just feel like in a game where he's not available for the entire game, right? I don't know necessarily if the
Right.
adrenaline, would it have kind of worn off by then? Because I think that kind of factors in, right? Because I'm
For
sure
sure.
everybody's like on edge, right? Given what happened, with Gobert and the team. So I don't know. That's also a really tough one to predict. And in this scenario, right, both New Orleans and Minnesota, right, have a lot at stake because neither
Mm-hmm.
team wants to miss the playoffs. Especially considering Minnesota gave up so much to get Rudy Gobert, right? That would be, a really bad look if he's essentially one of the reasons why they don't make it.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so I mean, there's a lot at stake there, but I don't know. They have been better with Mike Conley, but again, it wouldn't shock me again if they just had a really bad performance. I don't know, like, because again, with Zion, if he's just not going to be a bit available for the play-in, it makes me not want to necessarily pick New Orleans to win both play-in games,
Exactly.
but also Ingram's been really good, and it wouldn't surprise me if he just had a game where he played really well and just kind of just carried them over the top. He tried to do it today. He was close,
Yeah.
but obviously it didn't work out. So I don't know. Minnesota's a weird team. So I don't know. Between that one, uh, that's a really tough one. I feel like I might go with. I think I might have to go with Minnesota on that one. I don't
Okay.
know. That's just it's so hard
I
because
know.
again, I feel like if Zion was available, I would pick them, but I also don't think they'd be in the play-in if he was available. But I don't think he's coming back.
No, I don't think
So
he's coming back either.
like, yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I like New Orleans athleticism, right? With Murphy, Ingram, right? Herb Jones, like, and some of these other guys, Larry Nance, right? Alvarado's been out. If he's available, I
I
think that
forgot
makes a
about
huge
that
difference.
too.
Yeah, because he's been out. If he's available, that makes a difference because that helps them defensively because they've been really good defensively as of late. But I don't know. I don't know. I might end up switching that pick, but
Hmm.
you know what? For now, I think I'll go with Minnesota beating New Orleans only because again, like I don't know, even without McDaniels, I just feel like Minnesota could probably still win, right? Because like you have Edwards, you have Towns, you have Conley, like, and it just feels like it may just be that simple. Like
Yeah.
it's really tough, but I think I'm gonna have to go with Minnesota over New Orleans for that final 8th spot. I could be wrong though, wouldn't shock me.
Yeah. I have to agree with you. When both of these teams are healthy, I think New Orleans is better. Um,
Yeah,
but in the current state that they're both in, I'm picking Minnesota. I think they're a little bit more structured than this Pelicans team that's been reeling with injuries. And like you brought up a really good point about that adrenaline and everybody being on edge with today's game or Sunday's game. But it's just very interesting that there is that much at stake for the Timberwolves, and I think that's probably going to push them over the edge. I think New Orleans, they have the leeway to say, oh yeah, we just got injured, we were battling injuries all season, it's done. But with this team, with the Minnesota team, if they lose, that Gobert trade might go down as one of the worst trades of all time. You know what I
I
mean?
think some people think it already is.
Yeah, it's bad. And like it could really shake up the future infrastructure for how trades are done in the NBA, you know? But I think there's more at stake for the Timberwolves. And I think it's that simple. Like you said, their roster is a little bit better as of right now because there is no Zion. And, you know, with Towns, you got Anthony Edwards. I think they just have a little bit of an edge over the Pelicans at this moment. But it would not surprise me if, like you said, Brandon Ingram or CJ McCollum just decide to go off and explode and it's done, you know?
Yeah.
But I'm picking Minnesota because they're my dark horse as well. So I have to pick them.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I feel like it may just be simple as that, where
Yeah.
like without Zion, I think Minnesota probably just has a better chance to
They have
win.
the edge.
Uh, yeah, and again, like I mean, again, either way, there's high stakes for both teams, right? Because
For
again,
sure.
um, obviously with Minnesota, I think their pick goes to Utah regardless,
Yep.
right? But obviously, it'd be even worse if it ends up being a lottery pick, all
Yes.
right? Because Utah gets 2 lottery picks, which again, like you said, I think the trade looks even worse if they end up missing the playoffs and the
Yes.
play-in. If they miss the playoffs entirely, right? Like it'd
Yes.
be one thing like if they got in as the 8th seed and got, or the 7th seed and got eliminated. Well, I
Right.
guess they can't be the 7th seed, but I guess it'd be one thing if they got in but they just got eliminated. But
Right.
like if they just missed it entirely, it would look really bad.
Yeah, it would look almost as bad. Well, I think it would look even worse than the Dallas Mavericks, you know? And with the
Oh
Mavs,
God.
yeah, the Mavs should have been where the Thunder are, you know what I mean? Like, and
Yeah.
really should have been way above, but it's neither here or there. It's can't
Yeah.
change, you know, whatever
Yeah.
happened, but it is what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, their situation was really weird too, right? You had just the issue of, them sitting guys the last game of the regular season. Yeah, that's really disappointing, right?
Yeah.
Given that this team was in that team was in the Western Conference Finals last year, right? In a situation where I don't think a lot of people expected them to get
No.
that far, right? Then they were really up and down this season, right? We knew they were going to be worse. Then again, just everything went wrong, right? They let Jalen Brunson go. And then they made a panic trade for Kyrie and gave up, valuable pieces to get him to try to make up for what happened with Brunson. And then
Exactly.
ultimately it didn't help, made them worse. So now they kind of have to hope that the ping pong balls go their way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. That's not a great situation to be in. I think the Kyrie trade isn't going to go down as one of the worst
No, no,
ones,
no.
but just the decision making from the Dallas front
And the
office is gonna
results.
go just really just awful decision making, from Brunson on down, right?
Yeah.
Everything else after that's just been awful. But yeah, these playing matchups are going to be really cool. Obviously, we're not going to get into the other matchups quite as much, right, until the plan is done. But
Yep.
we have a couple of first round matchups that we already know, right? We got Clippers, Suns,
Yep.
Kings, Warriors in the West. What is it? Nets, Sixers,
Sixers, yeah.
and then Cavs, Knicks, or Knicks, Cavs in the East.
Yep.
Right. Just quick thoughts, I guess.
Yeah,
like
for
not
sure.
much, not like much more than 20 seconds. I think Cleveland, is going to beat New York.
Me too.
I think that I don't know when Randall's coming back, if he even comes back. If he comes back, I think they can make it a series. If he's
Right.
not available at all, I think it'll probably be a pretty quick series.
And that was a matchup we wanted to see too, you know, like that, I think one of us, I can't remember which one of us listed it. It might have been me, but I can't remember. That was one of the playoff matchups that we wanted to see.
Yeah, so I think if Randall's available, I think it might go 6, but
Yeah.
if he's not available, I think it'll probably be much quicker than that one.
For sure.
Yeah. Moving on to Sixers Nets, I think that one's going to be another quick series.
Yeah.
Maybe Brooklyn makes it interesting depending on how well, if Bridges can carry over his, regular season play into the playoffs. But I feel like Philly should win that series. If Philly loses that series, I mean, come on. I mean,
Yeah.
they're like the prohibitive favorites, I think, and with, amongst all analytics and
They shouldn't
Vegas odds
lose.
and all that. They're the prohibitive favorites. They shouldn't lose that series.
No.
I don't think they're going to lose that series.
No one on that
I
team's going to be able to stop Embiid, in my opinion, but
Yeah.
we'll see.
Right. Kings, Warriors. Kings have been really good this season, but I feel like that matchup is going to be really tough to go against the Warriors. They're getting Wiggins back. Peyton looks a lot better. So I mean, maybe the Kings, maybe they get out of there, but I feel like it's more likely Golden State's going to win.
Yeah.
They're kind of leaning towards being my pick to come out of the Western Conference.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
just yeah, I think they've been, better.
They have played
You know,
stellar.
yeah, guys have been getting healthy. I know they've been awful on the road. I don't know. It's really hard for me to write them off. I feel like I'm leaning towards picking them to come out of the West.
Okay.
I think they're going to beat Sacramento.
Yeah.
It could be
It's
close.
possible. Anything's possible.
Yeah, especially in the West.
Yeah.
And then obviously we have the other matchup, right? Suns Clippers, right? That should be a really good one. Paul George is going to be. We don't know if he's coming back. I think he said he's going to announce something on his podcast, so maybe he'll update us
Okay.
on if there's a potential return. I don't know, but as of right now, there's nothing. If he's not available, right? I think the Suns will probably win that one, or they should win that one.
Yeah.
If he's not available. If he's available, I think the Clippers could beat Phoenix.
It's possible.
I think they have more depth. Obviously you have Kawhi. I think Durant's the superior player, but I think Kawhi can, play, can hang with Durant in a playoff series. Paul George, right? Russell Westbrook, obviously that's a huge X factor, right?
Yes, it is.
We don't know how that's going to work necessarily come playoff time. I need to know if Paul George is available. If he's not available, I think Phoenix should win that series.
Yeah.
But if Paul George is available, I may lean towards Clippers, but it's going to be that series will go 6 or 7 if Paul George plays. But
I
if
think
he
it goes
doesn't play,
7.
I think the Suns will win probably in like 6 or something if George isn't available. So
and it's funny because that was one of the matchups that you wanted to see, I believe. And like they match up so perfectly, it's honestly scary. Like, because you could have Paul George on Devin Booker, you could have Kawhi on KD, you could have Russ on Chris Paul. I mean, there's so many ways that you could really look at that game that series, and it's going to be a wild one. Like you said, if Paul George is there, if he's not there, it's going to be a weird one. But at the same time, the Clippers do have a chance. But I'm thinking the Suns might take that one.
Yeah, like I said, I just need to know about Paul George. If he's not available, I'm definitely picking Suns.
It's a huge question mark.
And if he is available, I'll still probably end up picking Suns if he's not 100%.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll have to see. I may lean towards Clippers if he's available the whole series. If he's available from game 1, then I think it'll go 7. Obviously, Phoenix will have home court, so that matters. Right. But we'll see.
Yeah.
So moving on, we finally have our All NBA match. Our All NBA ballots, I guess, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, All NBA teams.
Exactly. Yeah. So we'll start by doing. I'll do my first.
Okay.
Do your first.
Cool.
So for my first team All NBA, and I think ours are going to be probably fairly different. We'll see. I think it's going to be really different.
This should be interesting.
But for my first team, for my guards, I got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
Okay.
Donovan Mitchell.
Okay, wow, that's different than mine.
Yeah, so for Shai, 31-5-5.
Okay.
Right, obviously, we talked about Oklahoma City overperforming, right, being way better than anybody expected, right, and that's largely due to him, right, so he's been great. Obviously, it's probably not like a great thing to have a player who's probably not going to be in the playoffs in first team. But, it's just with all the guards on the list, I just feel like that's the one that I want to pick just because I think he's been great this season. For a team where I don't think anybody expected them to be as good. Mm-hmm. And then for Donovan Mitchell, it's a little bit different because Cleveland's been really good as well. Right. And he's also been terrific. He's pretty much, completely turned Cleveland around. Right. 28-4-4, right, for the 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. Right. So he's been great. Jason Tatum for my forwards, right? I got Tatum and Giannis.
Okay.
I think for Tatum, right, 39-5.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. For the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference, right? I think he's kind of gone under the radar at times, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the MVP race, I don't think anybody's really brought him up, right?
You're talking about Tatum, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Nobody's brought him up as of late for the MVP race.
He was in the lead at one point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, early on in the season, yeah, but not as much at this point. But I think he's still been great.
Yeah, he's been really good.
Yeah, Giannis, same thing, 31, 12, and 6 for the team with the best record in the East and the best record in the NBA.
Yep.
I don't think that there's really any, qualms there with that. And then because I had Embiid as my MVP, I also have him as first team center,
Okay.
33, 10, 4.
All right.
Right. Obviously, they're the number 3 seed in the Eastern Conference, right? He's had, a lot of great stretches. It's been a really, again, we talked about the MVP race, right? It's been so back and forth. Right? Nobody really at any point, right, was like way ahead of the curve or way ahead of the race, right? But it felt like he had kind of clinched it, right? Denver had started sitting Jokic, right? And Giannis, I think for most people has probably missed too many games to be considered for MVP. So that's my first All NBA list. I'm sure yours
Okay.
is going to be different.
Yeah, it's a little bit different, but
Yeah,
for my first guard, I have Luca. I was hesitant to put him there, but I was looking at numbers, impact, all that stuff. I think he's that guy.
sure.
If you look at his stats, 32 points per game, 8 assists, 8 rebounds, damn near a triple double at the one, which is crazy. Well, one or two, whatever you want to, label him as. But for a guard, I think that's pretty stellar. And he's just one of a kind, in my opinion. And it's a shame that he's out of the playoffs, but that couldn't be the only, that couldn't be the reason why he's not in the first team for me. But yeah, so Luka's number one for me, and then two I have SGA. Same reasons as you, basically. Nothing really needs to be said about that. Same with Tatum, Giannis. Then we move on down to the big man center. I have Jokic. Embiid is not first team for me. I think, like you said, if we're gonna put our MVPs there, then I have to put Jokic there. Walking triple double, he's insane. He's consistent. Everything. He's the number one in the West. Simple as that. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. But yeah, this is an interesting list, and it's very interesting that our guards, that we only had two differences. You had Donovan Mitchell, and I had Luka, and then you had Embiid, and I had Jokic. But yeah, I think with Jokic, it's we kind of went into it last episode, but I'll say it once again. People don't, are tired of hearing the same answer and the same evidence, but he's averaging 25 points per game. It's a significant drop off from Embiid. However, I look at the entire impact. He's averaging also 12 rebounds and damn near 10 assists. So walking triple-double. I know triple-doubles have kind of become obsolete ever since, players have been getting them left and right almost every night. But, that's just fatigue and stat fatigue, and I have to put Jokic there. So that's my explanation for that. But I think our lists are interesting so far.
So moving on to second team, I had Stephen Curry,
Okay.
29, 6.
Okay.
Obviously, he was close, I think, to, making it a little difficult to put him on there because of the missed games. But I think he's played enough games to be on there.
Sure.
He's been great, even though the team's been pretty up and down this year, right? Doesn't matter, right? Obviously, you can't argue with those numbers.
Yeah.
I had Luka on my second team.
Okay. That's very interesting.
I just didn't want it was weird because I was kind of trying to decide whether or not I should have him on second or third. I just didn't like the idea of putting somebody on first team like that wasn't even in the play.
I get you. I don't
know. It just didn't sit right with me. So I had him on my second team, but I was really close to putting him like all the way down to third. But I was
fair.
I don't necessarily know if I should put him like
That's
that.
fair.
It's not all his fault. So I had him on the second team, like you said, 32, 8, and 8, right? Great numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously prior to the Kyrie trade, right, the team was doing better, right? Obviously they've dipped since then because, just they don't have the personnel.
Yep.
But he's still been really good. I had Jaylen Brown as my forward for second team All NBA.
Okay.
27, 7, and 4. That might be a little high, but again, I just think he's been really good, and I think he deserves
good.
recognition.
Yeah.
Considering how good Boston's been and how good he's been for Boston.
Okay.
I don't think you can leave him off that. Then I also had Julius Randle for second team, right? 25, 10, and 4, right, for the Knicks. Spoiler alert, I didn't have Jalen Brunson on my All NBA list.
Oh wow.
It was just tough. It was just kind of tough because I didn't want to necessarily have both of those guys on there. Right? Because I just feel like for All NBA, right, when you have like the 1 to 15 or whatever, right? I just don't know if I necessarily wanted two guys from the Knicks on there.
I get you.
Uh, yeah, just I don't know. I don't feel like both of them are like top 15, 20
Yeah.
guys. Maybe I'm
Yeah.
wrong. Maybe that might be unfair, but I had Randall on there.
Okay.
Um, and just guard wise, it was really hard for me to, have him, you know, ahead of some of these other guards.
Mm-hmm.
But I put Randall there, right? And then Jokic, I had him on second team instead of first, since he wasn't my MVP pick. Like you
Yeah.
mentioned, 25, 12, and almost 10, right, for the number one seed. That's obviously something that's really special. He's had a really good season, right? Offensively, one of the best, right?
Yep.
Some people might consider him the best, at least in the regular season. But I don't think it's necessarily a crime to have him on second team. And then I guess for you, right? You had
Yeah.
your second. Yeah,
Mine is very, very different.
yeah, I'm
So
sure.
I've got Dame as my first
Okay.
guard. And this kind of goes without saying, but I'm gonna say it anyway. 32 points per game, 7 assists. Stellar player. This is a really good career year for him. Unfortunately, they are not in the playoffs, not even in the play-in. We talked about that multiple times. Dame is one of our favorites on here. Very unfortunate with what's going on with him, but I think he's a sleeper. He's not talked about and hyped up as much as he used to be and should be, in my opinion. But yeah, I think he's definitely one of the top guards in the league. I have to put him there. Moving on, I've got Steph. Same reasons as you. He's really good. And the injuries did hurt his case. I think if he wasn't injured, he'd probably be above Luka, to be honest. But that's just
I
me.
think he's first team if he was healthy.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, first team if he's healthy. But it's Steph Curry. Kind of goes without saying. Then I've got KD for my forward, my first forward slot. He's just one of those guys. He's one of a kind. He's averaging 30 points, 6 rebounds, well, 7 technically. But he was hurt for a long period of time. So that did hurt his case too. But just based on what he's faced and the numbers that he's put up and what he's been through this season, I had to put him at second team. I think that would be a crime to not have him there. And then moving on, I've got LeBron James at the next forward slot. Once again, kind of goes without saying, one of the all-time greats, 30 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists. For his age, that's unheard of. He's definitely one of those guys that, if he was doing, a little bit more, first team for sure. But yeah, these numbers are solid, and I don't think you can really argue him being any lower than that, in my opinion. And then center, I've got Joel Embiid. Not a huge fan, but I know a lot of people are. He's averaging 33 and 10. Historical big man. This is crazy. We've never seen a big man do some of this stuff. I know I might be glazing here, but I don't care. He is good, but yeah. Go ahead and say it. Say it louder. Share for the rest of the class.
Joel MVB.
Yeah, that's his nickname for him. But yeah. It is Embiid, so I have to put him there. It would be a crime to have him any lower than that. But, Jokic was my MVP, so that's the reasoning behind that.
Yep. And then moving on to third All NBA team, I had Ja Morant as one of my guards.
Spoiler alert, I forgot Ja Morant. Wow. All right.
W. But anyways, yeah, so I had Ja Morant
Okay.
on my third team All NBA guard. I know he obviously had the personal stuff going on. I think there was a Washington Post article that came out the other day, detailing some other stuff about that. But regardless,
Yeah.
I think he's still played like 60 whatever games,
Yeah.
right? So he's played enough, I think to be on that list, right? 26, 6 and 8, right for the number 2 seed. It would be really difficult to not have at least one guy for Memphis right on the All NBA team. Right, because they're they have one of the best records in the league.
Yeah.
So, yeah, for me, I got to go with Ja on this one.
Yeah. I get
other
that.
guard spot.
I get that.
Yeah, I got De'Aaron Fox. For the Kings,
Okay.
25, 4 and 6. With the Lillard thing, I just didn't have him on there because just kind of like similar with the Luka thing. I just don't like the idea of putting somebody on that list if they're not even in the play-in.
I get you.
Sitting.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know. It'd be really difficult for me to do that, to put somebody on that list.
Right.
But Aaron Fox, right? You got the Kings, one of the best teams in the Western Conference, one of the best teams in the league. Right, De'Aaron Fox, right, has been one of the biggest reasons for that, right? Obviously, if you look at the clutch numbers, right, he's been one of the biggest clutch time players. I think the biggest one in the league this season. Um, Jimmy Butler, I also had on there
It's a good
for
pick.
Miami, right? 23, 6, and 5, right?
Okay.
Bounce back year shooting the three. At least in the regular season, right? He's normally been good in the playoffs, right? But his regular season 3-point numbers hadn't been as good.
Right.
Miami hasn't been as good this year, but I think in general he's still been himself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, right? So I think that is a pretty solid reasoning for that one. You had LeBron on second, and you said he shouldn't be lower. I actually had him third.
Okay. What's your
Which
reasoning?
29, 8, and 7. The only thing was that again he had missed a decent amount of time.
Very true.
Kind of another similar issue where they were not that great for most of the season. Obviously now they're the 7th seed. And just watching him, I just didn't like there had been stretches where especially early in the season, and then before this last couple of games, it felt like he wasn't playing as well. He's been
Okay.
playing much better as of late, but he had some stretches earlier in the season where it was really weird. I
Fair.
think some of that was due to I think he had an issue injury wise, and I think he was battling being sick earlier in the season.
Yeah. You're definitely
Then
right.
he went on that tear, right, where he was awesome.
Yep.
Right. But I don't know. Just for me, I had him as third team because I feel like he's been good, but and then also like the 3-point shot hadn't been as good this season.
Fair.
Again, it had been better recently, right? So, but we're talking about just the regular season, right? We're not talking about playoffs.
Yep.
I just feel like I've seen other seasons where he's been better, but I think he's
Oh,
been
yeah.
really good.
For sure.
So yeah, like he should be one of those guys on there. I just don't necessarily know. Like I wouldn't have him first, obviously.
Yeah.
And I think second makes a lot of sense, but I just wanted to, highlight Randall just because the Knicks had been really good.
Right. I get you. It's all fair.
Yeah, and then at center, I had Sabonis.
Okay.
AD, I think, has had a better season, but I also
Yes.
think he's missed a lot of games.
Too many.
And I think, you have to, give credit to Sabonis, who's been durable, right? And again, they are the number 3 seed in the Western Conference.
Yes, they are.
Right. So I think, so in this case, right, this is where I'm okay with putting Fox and Sabonis on there, whereas I wasn't with Brunson and Randall.
Okay.
And I just think with the guard spot, it was so competitive.
Yes.
Like somebody's going to get left out.
So much saturation there.
Yeah, right. But Sabonis, 19, 12, and 7, right, for one of the best teams in the Western Conference, right? Probably the biggest surprise story other than Oklahoma City this season. Right. It's actually been interesting because I remember I thought he had a hand injury early.
Yes, he did.
But he played through it.
He did. Yeah. We talked about that.
I don't know if it's healed or if it ever did heal up or whatever, but he's played a lot. Right. And I think that's one of the factors with the Kings this season is that they've been healthy pretty much the whole season.
Yes.
Which again, that's a good thing, right?
Right.
Obviously that's a valuable thing to have when all your guys are available, right? In a season where a ton of guys have missed time. But yeah, that's my thing. If AD had played a handful of more games, right, I would really want him to be on the third team.
Yeah, he deserves it.
Yeah, exactly. Because I feel like he's had a better individual season, but he's just missed so much time compared to Sabonis. I think
exactly.
You put Sabonis on there, but I wouldn't necessarily be mad if somebody put AD on there. But I have Sabonis.
Yeah. All right. This is going to be controversial, but I've got Jalen. Wait, what? Oh, sorry. I looked at the wrong thing. I've got Jalen Brunson, number 1. And you said you weren't really comfortable putting him on here, but I think I am, mainly because he took the jump that I don't think anybody really expected. He was really good in Dallas, but he's turned into a completely different player in New York. And, he's kind of put them on the map, per se, alongside Julius Randle. Of course, that duo is insane. The team is great.
I'm assuming you don't have Randle, right? Like, I'm assuming you don't have Randle.
Oh, we'll get there. We'll get there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But
Okay.
with Jalen Brunson, I just think, his impact and consistency is what puts him on this list for me. But that could be, a little bit of a hot take, but he is there, so he's my guard. Then for my second guard, I got to put Donovan Mitchell. The issue that I had with him was I don't think he was better per se than a lot of the guys that I put on the other, teams like, Luka. I don't think he's better than Luka. You can make the argument maybe, but I don't know. Shea, I don't think he's better than Shea right now. Dame, I don't think he's better. Steph Curry, I don't think he's better, but you know, the team's record and the consistency is there. So I think he deserves to be on this list. I just couldn't put him any higher than those guys. So that's that. And I can't remember his averages. I think it was like 28 or something like that, 28-4. But he's played really well. And then to move on for my forward, I have Jaylen Brown, and I couldn't not have him on this list. I'm the biggest Celtics hater of all time, but he's a hooper. He knows how to hoop. He's great. He's been putting up 26 and 7, and considering what Boston's have had to go through, yeah, he definitely deserves to be on this list. Honestly, if Giannis had a down season, he would probably be, a little bit higher. I would probably move like KD up or somebody or LeBron or something like that, and then put Jaylen Brown in team 2. But team 3, I think, is where he stands. And he's kind of slept on, not talked about as much as his co-star, but it is what it is. I think he definitely deserves some limelight, so he's there. And then for my last forward, I have Julius Randle. I know you weren't too keen on putting, both of those guys together, Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle, but I have to because he's also taken the step that I don't think a lot of people would have seen a few years ago. But they've really turned New York around. They're not a poverty franchise anymore, so I think they're back and they're probably here to stay as long as they can stay healthy. But we'll see because, Julius Randle is battling an injury, but as far as that goes, I think he definitely deserves to be on this list. Pretty impactful player for the Knicks, and I just hope he gets better. And then for center, it's Sabonis. Basically the same thing that you said. Consistency, health, numbers. And like you said, if AD was healthy, and played as many games as Sabonis, I don't even think Sabonis would probably be on this list. But you have to consider him due to the fact that he's played so much and he's played at a high level.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think your list is relatively similar. There's a few
Yeah,
guys that aren't on there. I just, some of the guys I didn't have, like in terms of Durant, he would have been there. I just felt like he missed too many games.
I get you.
And then Lillard, I just, missing the play-in, I feel like for me would just bump somebody off the list.
I get you.
Just missing it entirely, right? Because it's one thing if you're like 7, 8, 9, 10, and
Right.
you get knocked, right? But but that's not the regular season, right? That's
Yeah.
play-in, whatever. But for the regular season, just not even being in the play-in, I don't know. It would be hard for me to put somebody, on the All NBA team. But in fairness, I'm sure I've done it before. I'd have to look back on what I did last year. I'm sure there's probably some scenarios where if somebody just put up ridiculous numbers, it would happen. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, regardless, I think that those are pretty good. Moving on into All Rookie.
Oh yeah.
Right. So I think I'm just gonna spoiler alert. We have the same.
Yeah, we have the exact same. We talked about it before.
Exactly. Yeah. So Jaden Ivey for
Yeah.
Detroit, right? 16, 5-4, right? He's been really good this season. It's been really weird, right? Because Detroit's been in a strange situation, right? Where Cade Cunningham's out, right? He missed most of the season,
Yeah.
right? And then after the trade deadline, they just had some really weird lineups where they were playing like 2 centers at the same time, right? Awful spacing lineups, where it just, I'm sure it would, with Jaden Ivey, right? I'm sure there were games where he didn't really shoot well and
No.
wasn't really that efficient. I don't necessarily look at that as a down aspect of a rookie season because just
No.
in general, right, it's really hard to come in as a rookie and be incredibly efficient.
First year.
And just yeah, exactly. And when you consider, what you're working with, right, just very unconventional lineups,
Yes.
it makes it tougher as well, right, to put things into perspective and context. Jalen Williams, right, the guard for Oklahoma City, right, 14, 3-4, right. He's been great, especially for the last few months, right, helping push Oklahoma City right into that play-in spot that nobody expected. So I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that, right? Benedict Mathurin as our forward, right, 16-4, right, kind of jumped onto the scene early, right, because Indiana had that stretch earlier in the season where they were a playoff team, right? Really been talked about as much as of late, just because Indiana really fell off, right? Obviously, there were guys that had injuries, and they leaned more into the tanking. That's kind of the interesting thing about the tanking aspect this season, right? Because going into the season, there was a lot of talk about teams, going all out trying to tank for Wembanyama.
Yeah, Wemby.
Yeah, exactly. But it took teams a while before they officially threw in the towel because we had a lot of teams like Utah, like Indiana, like Oklahoma City, well, not yeah, where we just thought they were going to be like complete dumpster fires,
Yeah.
right? In terms of just throwing away games,
True.
right? But they were, yeah, but they were pretty competitive. Like, I mean, Oklahoma City's in the play-in, right? Obviously, they could
Yes.
be in the lottery if they miss the play, if they lose, right? But they're
Yeah.
not going to get like, the top pick, right? They're not going to get like a top 5 pick. But
No.
just regardless, just really weird, right? Because we thought they were going to tank, but they really didn't, for most of the season. But then obviously for the last month, right? Then everybody's been tanking
Yes.
since then, right? There have been some stretches where it's just gotten really egregious, right? Like the Dallas thing, was wild where they're sitting, a lot of guys, right? They have this
Yeah.
scenario where they have like um Justin Holiday, who's like a guard at center, right?
Yeah. I don't know.
Exactly, right, and they're not the only team to do that, right? Like
No.
like even today, right? Like they were playing the Spurs and like they were down by like 50,000 points like in the first quarter.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it got close, but still, regardless, it's just kind of funny.
Yeah. It's been weird. I don't know.
Yeah, and then moving on to the other forward, Paolo Banchero. That's my personal rookie of the year pick, and I'm
Me as
sure
well. Yep.
exactly right. 27-4, terrific rookie season.
Phenomenal.
Right, I believe he's had right the most 20-point games as a rookie, right, since maybe LeBron, right?
I
So
think so.
obviously,
Yeah.
yeah, so just to put in perspective, right, he's been incredible this year. Obviously, Orlando doesn't necessarily get a ton of discussion, right, because they haven't really been that great, but just
Future's bright with them.
yeah, watching him, it makes sense why Orlando decided to pick him number one because
Yes.
going into the draft, right, there was a ton of discussion about who's going to go number one, Paolo, Chet, or Jabari, and he's just owned that conversation this
Yeah.
season, right? Obviously, Chet didn't have the opportunity, to really do anything about it, right? But compared to Jabari Smith, Paolo's been
It's a
way better,
huge
right?
gap.
And I'm not even saying Jabari Smith's bad, right?
No.
It's just like I can see why I think Orlando ultimately made the right decision because this guy has come into the league and he's already really good. And, if he continues to get better, right, I mean, it's going to be really scary to see what that,
Yeah.
what he can do.
He's definitely going to be a force.
Exactly. And then for the center spot, Walker Kessler, 9 points, 8 rebounds a game, over 2 blocks, 72% from the field, right?
Yeah.
One of the more interesting aspects, right, of that Gobert trade, right, was, all the picks, obviously, that went out. And Walker Kessler was one of them. Well, it's different because he was in the draft. He was in last year's draft, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of counted him as a draft pick technically
Yeah.
because, he never played for Minnesota, right? He was
Exactly.
drafted by Minnesota and they traded him to Utah. But
Yeah, it's more of a
he's already
technicality kind of thing.
yeah, exactly. But obviously for Utah, he's been great, right? Essentially, he's
Mm-hmm.
been a replacement for Rudy Gobert. They've essentially found a replacement for him.
And he's solid too.
Exactly. Except this time you're talking about, a young guy, who's on a rookie contract, right? And obviously for, when you have him under a really small contract for 3-4 years, that's a lot of value, right?
Exactly.
That's crazy, right? I mean, you traded for Rudy Gobert, and you could have had not that I'm not saying that he is better or worse than Gobert, but you have a similar type of player.
Mm-hmm.
Had that guy that was right there, and then you gave him up. I mean, maybe he doesn't look like this in Minnesota. I don't know, right? Will Hardy's been a great coach for Utah.
Yeah,
Maybe that's
really
a
good
factor.
coach.
But regardless, I mean, I just wanted to shout him out just because
Yeah.
he's been really great. Just speaking of Utah, right? Lauri Markkanen is another guy where I feel like he could have been on All NBA, but it's just another scenario where like they've been sitting him a lot of games down the stretch.
Mm-hmm.
So like even though he was our pick for most improved, right? I don't know, just the sitting games down the stretch, and I know it's not necessarily like his decision,
Right.
right? But it's just a scenario like that is just really weird. Although in fairness, he's played more games than I guess you would think.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I might
So
have to
consistent though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's our all rookie first team
Mhm.
picks, right? Yeah, we pretty much had the same picks. You can go into them if you want.
I don't really need to. I mean, you covered all the basics, or bases. I don't know why I said basics, but bases. And this draft class is kind of weird because it's like, Paolo's just so ahead of everyone else, but there are some standouts, and I think this class has a lot of potential. But I wasn't too impressed with it. The standouts are probably Paolo, Mathurin, and Jalen Williams for me. But I mean, those are great guys, but everyone below kind of has the potential to really, go far, I think, but we'll have to see because we have to give them a couple of years, I think.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want
Yeah.
to necessarily completely write off
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
yeah, like I don't think we should necessarily write these guys as stories because I
At
mean it's
all.
their rookie, right? Obviously, I think the key is right. Obviously, Chet being hurt obviously
Yes.
hurts. No
That
pun
shakes things
intended.
up.
Yeah, no pun intended. Right, Jabari Smith, I think struggling during the early part of the season. He played much better the second half of the season, right? I think that kind of clouded a lot of people's perceptions of this
Yeah.
draft. Like if you remember, the COVID draft, right? 2021, I think, right? That
Mm-hmm.
was the one with Edwards, Wiseman,
Yes,
LaMelo, right?
yes.
Where everybody thought going in that draft was going to stink, right?
Right.
But it turns out a number of guys in that draft have been really good, right? Because there were questions about all three guys at the top, right?
Yep.
Edwards, Wiseman, LaMelo. Obviously, Wiseman hasn't necessarily panned out, but Edwards and LaMelo have obviously been great, right? Because again, Edwards was the number one pick, and people had a lot of questions about how committed he was, right? But now, like when you hear him talk, right, he's clearly committed.
Yeah.
Um,
It was a
you
matter,
know,
like with that draft, it was like a matter of health, character, and like experience. Like people were questioning Wiseman's experience, Anthony Edwards' character, and then you've got LaMelo's health, But that turned out to be a very interesting draft outside of Wiseman. But I think it's a little too early to give up on him. But he can turn it around.
yeah, and then going into the all rookie second team, I think our picks are again pretty much the same.
Yes, they are.
And Nembhard, right, for Indiana, right, 9, 4, and 3,
Hmm.
right. With the second team, right, the stats aren't necessarily going to be super
Yeah,
impressive,
there's
right,
going to be a
but
drop
yeah, but still, they play very well, and I think above expectations, right?
for
Shaden
sure.
Sharp for Portland,
Very good
right?
player.
Yeah, 10 points, right? 3 rebounds, 1 assist, right? Obviously, super electric in terms of his athleticism.
Yep.
It's a shame he dropped out of the dunk contest, right?
Yeah,
But
I wish we could have seen that. That would have been phenomenal. But we did get
yeah,
it, one of the best of all time, though.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Keegan Murray, right? Right as a forward, right for Sacramento.
Hmm.
Kind of an interesting story for him because, right, the Sacramento Kings take him, and Jaden Ivey was on the board, and everybody was kind of clowning. We weren't necessarily right, but everybody was kind of clowning Sacramento for taking him over Ivey.
Hmm.
Um, I just wasn't as familiar with Keegan Murray, but I didn't necessarily look at it as like this is a disaster pick, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, yeah, wing, right? He can shoot, right? It felt like Sacramento was leaning towards, more like a guy that's already ready to contribute,
Yes.
right? Which is what Keegan Murray's been, right? Right, because it's very rare that like a top 5 pick is going to be on a team that's a playoff team, right? But
Right.
that's what happened.
Yeah.
Um, but just wanted to shout him out because it's just been a really cool story for him, right? Where
Yeah. He's a
he
big
gets a
shot
lot.
maker, too.
Exactly, right. And then Jabari Smith Jr., right, as the other forward. It was kind of a toss up between him and Jeremy Sohan,
Yeah.
and Sohan's been really good, especially on the defensive side. But I just
Extremely.
felt like Smith, turned it on the second half of the year, right? Ended up averaging 12 and 7
Huge
with a
bounce
block.
back. Bounce back.
I like his defense. Um, in terms of his upside, right? Also, like you have to factor in Houston's just been, we're gonna talk about it right in a little bit, when we talk about our new segment. But Houston's
Yeah.
also just been just such a bizarre team this season in terms of like the lack of structure or anything. So I feel for a
Leadership,
lot of the
everything.
guys, exactly. So I feel for a lot of the guys who were on that team.
Yeah.
But just regardless, right? I feel like he still probably played under expectations compared to what a lot of
Yes.
people thought. But
He
I
was
don't
supposed to go
necessarily.
number one. Sorry to cut you off, but he was definitely supposed to go number one.
Yeah, exactly. But I still think he still had a solid rookie season. But obviously, from the number 3 pick, you'd like him to be on first team. But
Yes.
regardless, either way, I think he'll be fine. I think he'll be better. It'll be interesting to see, where he continues to go from here.
Yeah, he's got tremendous upside, but it is what it is. And some rookies, they don't always have a great first season. You just got to give them some time. Like I said, I think this is a draft class where we're probably gonna have to give these guys maybe one or two more seasons until they come into their own.
Yeah. Yeah, 30% from 3. Obviously,
Yeah.
not, great when he was expected to be a better shooter. But again, I'm not gonna write guys off. I'm not even
Exactly.
writing. He's on my He's on my
Yeah.
rookie team. It's just again, you'd like to see a little bit more. But I think
Exactly.
I think you'll see more from him next season.
Yeah.
And then at the center spot, Mark Williams, 9 points, 7 rebounds, right, one
Mm-hmm.
block. I mean, the thing with him is that was kind of weird was that Charlotte was just in this weird stretch earlier in the season where they were playing like Mason Plumlee, right, all the minutes at center, right, and like Mark Williams wasn't playing at all. I think he was
Right.
really in the G League.
Yeah, I think he got called up. Yeah.
Exactly, right? So he didn't really play at all for Charlotte until they traded Plumlee to the Clippers, which
Mm-hmm.
just it doesn't make any sense, when we knew Charlotte going into the season wasn't going to be good. Right, we've talked about it. I think at times they are probably a little better, right, than you
Yes.
would think, but they're still bad.
Yes, they
Don't get
are
me wrong.
bad.
Yeah, exactly. But it didn't make any sense to me why you would draft a guy in the lottery just to not play him at all. And like
Yeah.
I understand that Mason Plumlee, is a decent player, but like, I mean, you have a guy that you drafted in the lottery, especially because a lot of people thought Mark Williams was going to be good.
Right.
So, we didn't really get a chance to see a whole lot of him until this last stretch of the season. Right, didn't really get to play with LaMelo a whole lot because when he started playing, LaMelo season was basically done. Right, 'cause he
Yep.
missed a ton of time this season. So, just another weird, scenario story for this guy. But I think since he's been out of the G League and playing, he's been really good, looking like the prospect that everybody thought was going to be good coming out of Duke.
Yeah. It's interesting, but yeah, I think this class is going to be good though, but just give it time.
And then to wrap up our All NBA people, we have All NBA defense. So
Mm-hmm.
for first team, my Drew Holiday as one of my guards, right? I don't think there's any necessarily issues there, right? He's been one of the best two-way guards in the league. He's had a great season. Um, and then and then it was kind of hard for me to decide between Marcus Smart and Derek White. I feel like Derek White's been better on the season, so I actually
Okay.
gave him first team All NBA defense
Okay.
because I think he's been really good for Boston this year. I think that trade last year, right, where they got him, I think is kind of a really underrated trade where they sent out Josh Richardson, and they picked up Derek White, right, and since he's been in Boston, he's been really good for them, and like again, I think he's been better than Marcus Smart this year, right? One of the best shot blocking guards, right, a really good athlete.
Yeah.
I think he changes a lot of their defensive schemes when he's
Yeah.
out there, just because
He is a big help.
yeah, exactly. He's a good athlete. He's smart. So I maybe first team is a little too high, but I don't know. I mean, there's only two teams,
Yeah.
so and then because Jaren Jackson Jr. was my defensive player of the year pick, I have him as one of my forwards. Right, I don't have a small forward really here. I have both him and Giannis.
Okay.
Right, I think you can get a little bit creative with these. You don't have to have a small forward necessarily, but
Right.
I got both of them because obviously I think they're both terrific defenders. And then I have Brook Lopez at center.
Okay.
I think he's been insane defensively this season, right? It's kind of just a really cool stretch of his career, right, where he came into the league. Everybody says this whenever you watch the Bucks, like on a national TV game, right, where he came in primarily as an offensive-minded big man,
Yeah.
right?
Shooter.
Kind of like yeah, exactly, mid-range and in, right? Not really a three-point shooter, but more of like a low post scorer. Then all of a sudden, towards the later part of his career, right, he becomes more of a stretch five, right, where he's all of a sudden stepping out to the 3-point line. He's been a really effective 3-point shooter, and he's been a way better shot blocker and defender.
Yes.
Right? He wasn't a great defender early on in his career. Rebounding isn't the same, but he's still a guy, even though he doesn't get a high level of rebounds necessarily, he still boxes out, right? And that allows guys like Giannis, to get the boards and push the pace in transition, right? So even though he's no longer getting like 10 rebounds a game, right, he can still be a problem there.
Underrated.
And also in general, right, once you start stepping out to the 3-point line, you're not getting as many offensive rebounds anyway. So it's pretty difficult to get double-digit rebounds and
As
take
a
a high volume
Yeah.
threes. Yeah, exactly. But regardless, just kind of a crazy stretch of his career. But it's really cool to see, just the evolution of these type of guys.
Yeah, for sure. So for my first team, I've got Drew Holiday. I think that goes without saying. He's one of the best. I think he's probably the best defensive guard in the league. He brings that energy. It's high level, and he just has automatic clamps. Like, it's just simple as that. And then for my second guard spot, I've had Marcus Smart. I had to pick him over Derek White. Spoiler: Derek White is in my second team, but I think Marcus Smart, he does bring. I think he's one of their leaders, so that's kind of why I put him there. I know, statistically it may be, a little bit of a stretch, but I think Derek White still has a little bit of improving to do. I think Marcus Smart is a more solidified, but I think, Derek White, he's kind of like a wild card. You can just put him on somebody and, he's going to mess them up, get in their head. But with Smart, I think it's more of, what's coming, but at the same time, he's still able to stop you. So that's kind of the reason why I put him there. Then obviously Jaren Jackson Jr., he's there as well. I think he is Defensive Player of the Year, but at the same time, I don't know. I think Giannis has made a case for that as well, and that's why Giannis is there as well. So I have Jaren Jackson Jr. and Giannis. And then for the center position, I have Bam Adebayo. I think Bam is a little bit more of a versatile defender than Lopez, but Lopez is a really good defender. Like you said, he's really changed the perception of his career. Like you said, he was more of a, offensive minded, back to the basket, mid-range turnaround kind of guy. But, he has improved. But with Bam, I think he's just a little bit more athletic. So I kind of have to give Bam, the slot because he's a little bit more athletic. So I think that also opens up your abilities on the defensive end. But, Lopez, it's close, but I'm going to give it to Bam.
And in fairness, he doesn't have a Giannis type player.
Exactly.
To help him out on the defense.
So he's kind of got to shoulder the load. So
yeah, that's kind of one of the difficult aspects when you're measuring defense at times, because like when you look at individual defensive ratings, sometimes that can be kind of misleading because sometimes it depends on who's out there with them, right? Right. Sometimes teams could miss shots and it's not because that person's doing a good job of playing defense. So it's kind of hard to measure these type of metrics, but regardless. I think your argument for Bam is a really good one, just in terms of like Lopez at the rim is a terrific defender, right? But he's not as versatile of a defender as Bam. Right?
Yes.
Bam can beat better. Like you said, he's more athletic, even though he's not as tall, right? Obviously, that doesn't matter, right? We've seen him make big defensive plays, right, against the Celtics, right? He had that block against Jason Tatum. So I think that's a really good one. For my second team, I had Marcus Smart instead of Derek White, right? Like I said, I think White's been better than Smart this season. So your arguments for Smart, pretty much the same with mine. I just have him a second team.
Okay.
Then I have the other guard spot. I have OG Anunoby.
Okay.
I think he's been really good defensively for Toronto. Obviously, they haven't been a good team this year, but I think he's played really well. Every year it feels like we kind of talk about him sometimes as like a really good two-way guy, right? But I think he's really emerged this season.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Jaden McDaniels, right?
Okay.
At my first forward spot, right? I think he needs to be on there because he's been great defensively in terms of his versatility, in terms of being able to guard guards and wings, right, as well as other types of forwards, right? So I think he needs to be on there. And then I also had Evan Mobley as my other forward.
Okay.
Right, in terms of his length, his athleticism, right, at the 4 spot, right? He's been really good this season. I think his, second year jump has been really good, especially as of late.
Yes.
He was a guy that I thought, coming into last year's draft was going to be really good.
Mm-hmm.
Some people weren't necessarily sold on him, right? Because, there were talks about, right, Jalen Green or Evan Mobley,
yes.
right? And, amongst others, right? And I really liked Evan Mobley, just as a big, as a
solid game.
I know some people were kind of concerned about, like he's, really thin, doesn't shoot that well, but I really like him, and I think he's made really good strides as a defender, which I don't think most people saw coming. I think most people saw him as more of like an offensive minded guy.
I thought he was offensive big.
Yeah. And then at the center spot, I have Bam.
Okay.
Just again, Miami hasn't been as good defensively this year as Milwaukee. But at the same time, I think Bam has been a bright spot of their defense.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's on this list. So that's my second team.
Okay. Yeah, so I've got OG Anunoby for my first guard. And it kind of goes without saying, I think he's one of the best two-way players in the game right now. His length and speed and agility and ability to kind of read the defense is kind of what put him there for me. And then I have Derek White next, and it's kind of the same thing that you said. I think him and Marcus Smart are more interchangeable, so I can't really, be super mad at somebody for putting him in the first team. But, he's in my second team, and I think, like I said, he's more of a wild card defender because he kind of just is out there and you don't know what to expect. And then Jaden McDaniels as well. He's really good. Length, speed, and ability to read. It's great. And I think he's a really solid piece that that any team would be willing to have. I think that's kind of like what the ideal defender is in the league, especially at his height and ability to defend. Then obviously Evan Mobley. I think he's one of the better, big men defenders. He's a power forward, but technically you can really put him at center too. But he's just really good, and I think the length puts him above a lot of people. It's very similar to Giannis, but I think with more experience, I think he's only going to get better. And, we could be seeing him potentially be in Defensive Player of the Year conversations in the future. I think he just needs to get a little bit better and keep his feet on the ground. That's the only thing that I had an issue with was, him being grounded. I think if he gets a little bit more discipline in that field, I think he could easily be, even higher on this list. And, this is pretty high. And then I have Brook Lopez as my center. It kind of goes without saying. We kind of touched on it earlier. He's a great defender, just not as versatile as Bam. So that's why I have him at the on the second team. So, yeah, our lists are pretty similar.
Yeah, so these are all NBA picks, obviously. If you have any disagreements or agreements, right, you can leave them in the comments, right?
Yeah, let us know.
Exactly. And then to kind of wrap things up, we're going to get into some news, right? So, bad news for Memphis, right? Unfortunately, Steven Adams, he's been ruled, according to Woj, out for the postseason, right?
Yeah.
So pretty rough. Memphis generally in terms of, plus minus, right? And I know plus minus is a flawed stat, right? But generally they've been better when he's out there.
Yeah.
I will say with Adams, the thing is that when I look at him, I do think that there are some teams that he doesn't match up as well against. So depending on who they play, it may not hurt them as much.
Right.
I remember last year against Minnesota, right? They didn't play him a whole lot because he couldn't match up against Towns.
Right.
And just the shooting that Minnesota had, because Minnesota shot the ball really well from three last year, right? So, I mean, like, he didn't really match up well, and he played a lot less minutes against them. But against a team like, let's say the Lakers win in the play-in against Minnesota, right? You would need Steve Adams, right, to help,
Yes.
Kind of battle LeBron and AD, around the basket. So that's kind of a shame that, he's going to be out, right? One of the more likable guys, I think, in the league. Which it was kind of interesting, right? Because initially, right, a report had come out that Memphis had cut one of their guys that they had drafted this year, right? What's his name?
It's not, you're not talking about Lofton, are you?
Oh, I think his name was Kennedy Chandler, right?
I
think that's
yeah.
Kennedy Chandler, right? So Memphis cut him, right? And it was kind of weird because it was like, right? He had a long-term contract, so that's kind of random. That doesn't normally happen. But then not long after that, it was reported Adams was done for the season, right? And then not long after that, then it was reported Kenny Lofton Jr., the guy you mentioned, right?
Yeah.
One of my guys from college. He got a long-term deal, right? So, I don't think he'll play a whole lot, right? He is a rookie. But regardless, either way, tough break for Memphis, right? Because again, depending on if they play, they might really need him again. Matchup dependent, as some of the mid-tier centers are against a lot of teams, right?
Yes.
But regardless, right? You never want to see one of your starters out, for the entire postseason because and also again as a veteran guy who's been in a lot of big playoff series, right? And it seems like he's kind of like the de facto leader of the team, sort of veteran leader for the team.
For sure.
It's a shame to not have him out there on the floor because there's a difference between having him in the locker room versus actually having him on the court.
Yes.
This is a pretty tough blow.
Yeah. And for me, Steven Adams is one of those guys where it's like I don't really look at his stats, like, because they don't necessarily matter to me. I look at it more of what he does on the court. Like, if you look at how Memphis plays when he's on the court, it is so funny because he will literally move and box people out as Ja is going up, like for a dunk. So he'll clear the lane for Ja. That's why Ja gets so many like paint buckets, is because there's nobody really there to contest because Steven Adams is pretty much bullying them out of the way. So I think that's going to be something that they're going to be missing, but I don't think it's going to, make them, automatic losers or something like that. But it will hurt them, and I think their morale, it's probably going to hurt their morale more so than their game plan, because I think you can kind of game plan to win without Steven Adams, but morale wise and like you said, teammate wise, I think it's going to probably hurt them because they're going to be like, dang, we don't have our guy, we don't have Grandpa in the locker room, So, yeah, I think that's going to hurt.
Tough break for Jason Momoa there.
Yeah,
So
Aqua, man.
Exactly, yeah. So moving on to our next round of news, we also had a couple of coach firings, right? So we'll start with Detroit, Dwayne Casey, head coach for the Detroit Pistons, right? Former coach for the Raptors. He's out. He's being promoted to the front office, right? Kind of an interesting situation where the team didn't really do well, but he's going to be moved into a front office role. But again, right, there wasn't a whole lot you were going to do with that situation, right? You had a lot of injuries. Their best player was out. But it's going to be interesting to see what he can do in that front office. I think their GM Troy Weaver has done a pretty good job over the last couple of years, right? Getting Cade Cunningham, getting Jaden Ivey, right? Being able to trade for Jalen Duren, right? Making a gamble move for Wiseman. We'll see if it pans out.
Right.
Obviously, they've had some guys that haven't hit as well, right? Like Killian Hayes, but still, regardless, I think they've done a pretty good job at adding, talent given what they have to work with, right? And obviously, they're going to have a chance at one of the top picks, once again. Potential Wembanyama spot. We'll have to see.
That would be crazy.
Exactly. But regardless, tough break for Casey, right? Because, he was the coach for Toronto. They got better every year under him, right? Then they had the year where they were at the top of the East and then got swept by LeBron's Cavs. And then the following year they win the title, right? So, not great. And it seems like Nick Nurse may be on his way out. We don't know. We'll
Potentially.
have to see. A lot of people think so. I don't know. They mentioned replacement names. I'm not really familiar with these guys, other than say like Ime Udoka. But regardless, what are your thoughts about the Dwayne Casey firing?
I mean, I think it's a bad thing for him, but at the same time, it's not a total loss because he is moving up to the front office, like you said. I think he's got a great basketball mind, so I'm not too worried about that. I just don't know who the heck they're going to replace him with. That's my concern. And with Udoka, like, his situation is up in the air. He could be blackballed from the NBA forever for, what happened with him. But, yeah, I do like this, but at the same time, I would have kind of liked to have seen him, maybe give it a couple more years and, really develop the team that they built, for him, basically. And like you said, Wemby's in the mix now, potentially. So it really would have been cool to see, but it is what it is, and I'm sure they'll figure out, their future pretty soon because time is running out a little bit, but I think, they do have some leeway because they are such a bad team right now.
And moving on to Houston, this was kind of one that I don't think shocked either of us, right? We had been talking about their situation for pretty much most of our run with this podcast. So Steven Silas for Houston, right? They didn't pick up his option, so he's out as the Houston head coach.
Yeah.
Another situation where, not a whole lot to work with, but similar to Detroit, I still feel like that he didn't maximize what was there.
Not at all.
It was weird because when he first got there, right, he was expected to coach Harden and Westbrook. They both wanted out, not because of him, right, but just they knew the team wasn't going anywhere.
Yep.
And then in his place, right, they were replaced with a bunch of young guys. So kind of a tough break for him because I do think he seems like a relatively, smart guy, seems like a really good guy.
Yeah.
They did mention he'll have some other opportunities as maybe like an associate head coach or like a top assistant coach. So I think he'll still be able to stick around, but I don't necessarily know if he'll get an opportunity for a head coaching gig anytime soon. So I don't know about that one. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Like I said, I feel for him, but this was one I think we all saw coming.
Yeah, I think it was time, for them to change up the scenery, change up the vibe. I think it would be cool to still have him in the org. I think that would probably be a help because I've heard good things about his character, and you hate to see a guy with good character go down in flames like this. But, I just don't think that he was really cut out to be coaching a team like that where you have all these young guys, isolation players with, visible egos, but, yeah, they need somebody who's going to, step up and really maximize everyone on the team and make them, find their roles because we've already explained. We think that, I'll speak for myself. I think that team is like the AAU of the NBA. Like it is pretty rough,
Yeah.
So like, I don't know if you agree with that, but
I do.
Yeah.
I mean, every time I watch them, it just looks like a mess.
Yeah, it's a clown show over there, but I'm sure they'll figure it out. And we don't want to hate on them, but I am wishing that Silas does stay in the organization in some sort of role. Like you said, associate coach or something like that, something just to keep him around because he is a good guy apparently. So allegedly,
I think he'll probably end up being somewhere else. I
okay,
don't see him going back to Houston.
yeah,
They mentioned interesting names for replacements. They mentioned Udoka. His
okay,
name has come up a ton, so I feel like he'll probably get another opportunity.
yeah, somewhere.
Since it seems like every time, although you never know, right? Because Mark Jackson was kind of in a situation where his name would always come up,
Very
but
true.
so we'll have to see. They also mentioned if Nick Nurse is gone, he might be a replacement for Houston. And then they also even mentioned Frank Vogel.
That's
He used to coach
surprising.
the Lakers. Yeah, well, yeah, so that's kind of an interesting scenario. I think, any three of those hires I think could work. I feel like Udoka and Nurse are better than Vogel. Like I thought
Yes,
Vogel did a good job with the Lakers. But I feel like Nurse and Udoka are probably superior coaches. But
yes,
obviously, with Udoka, you have the baggage. And then, with Nurse, obviously, he's going to a situation in Houston, kind of like, with what Silas is going through. Does he want to
yes,
do that? I mean, he
yeah,
already has a title to his name, but I would feel like Nurse would probably prefer to probably coach a team that's closer to being like a more competitive roster as opposed to like
yeah.
a rebuild. But I could be
Especially,
wrong.
yeah, especially since they're like the attack on Nurse is that he doesn't know how to develop players either. So it's like I don't know if that would really fit what he's trying to accomplish. But yeah, I think Udoka's probably the guy that I would choose to go to Houston. But you don't know because his situation is so up in the air. He could be out of the league forever.
Guess we'll just have to see how this unfolds. I don't
Yeah,
know if
man.
any of these coaches will get hired before the season ends. Right? We
Right.
saw Darvin Ham get hired, I think, during the playoffs last year,
Yes.
but usually coaches are more of like an off-season hire,
Yes.
right? Like once the whole season's over. But regardless, we'll see where this continues to go. So yeah, that's pretty much it for today's episode of Off Ball Takes. This was definitely a much longer one, but
Yeah, for
we had a
sure.
lot to talk about. So as usual, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. As we appreciate all the support that everyone's given us over the course of our run.
Yeah,
So
man.
have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you Thursday. Again, don't forget the live streams.